Welcome back to the Life of Tashmia. Today I have Charlotte from White Dakini. Charlotte is a tantric practitioner, and we're going to find out how she got into Tantra and about her practice. We're going to talk about Kundalini and what that means, and talk all things energy and so much more. So, thanks, Charlotte, for joining us today. It's really nice to have you here to talk about Tantra. So I just wanted to give everyone a bit of a background into who you are and how did you get into becoming a Tantra practitioner?
Mm. Well, hello. It's nice to be here. So, my path to Tantra has been a little bit convoluted in the beginning, a little bit challenging. I actually started with yoga at age 19, and that was a really powerful practice for me. It really helped me find connection with myself
Mhm.
and being naturally quite a sensual being as well and connected to my sexuality. I sort of sniffed out how I could find a deeper connection and infusion with sacred sexuality,
Mhm.
paired with this mindfulness, this awareness of the body. And so, how I found Tantra, I actually found through a lover. And at the time, I didn't know he'd studied Tantra.
Mhm.
And that was quite an interesting experience because he was using a lot of techniques, eye gazing being the first one.
Yeah.
And he managed to hook me right in.
Really? So you felt it from like the first kind of attempt with him?
The energy between the two of us
Yeah.
was undeniable. It was such a pull. And then hooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it became like psychic hooks as well. And I had an experience like exploring, like this tug of war of love, trying to sort of explore love with him over a year and a half. And he was just only dropping in to explore the practice for himself with me.
Okay.
So it was a bit vampiric in a way.
So a bit like one-sided, I guess.
Yeah, and he wasn't
Yeah.
really interested in teaching me anything of what he'd learnt. And so over that period of time, the people I was living with, this was up in Byron Bay, um, they actually shared a book, which was a lighter side of Tantra and the first introduction to some of the philosophy that I'd had clear exposure to. That was A Tantric Quest by Daniel Odier.
Mhm.
And the concepts in that book were just stunning. Like reading through that book, I fell in love with it straight away and started to understand the links between sacred sexuality, spirituality, and this just deep devotional worship
Mhm.
of the divinity within another.
Yeah.
And what I've learned over this time from the dark side of being in this toxic to and fro love battle
Yeah.
to the beauty and the light of that aspect of tantra is very multifaceted.
Mhm.
You're really looking at the darkest of the dark
Yeah.
and some really beautiful elevated light themes as
Yeah.
well. So it took me a little while from these years, it was around 22, 23, to become a tantra practitioner. And that was an interesting path in itself. So, with everything that I knew about yoga, because by this point I had done a yoga teacher training
Mhm.
in Byron Bay and in India, I I'd had a Kundalini rising, and I think this is a reflection of my gung ho nature, where I tend to just go right into something.
Can you just tell us what Kundalini is? Because I know a lot of people won't know what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So at the time, I didn't actually know
Yeah.
what it was. It took me probably 3 years to come across the information that was like, oh, wow, that's what happened to me. I was at a festival and I was in the flow. We took a little bit of, am I allowed to say?
Yeah.
LSD.
Yeah. You can say whatever.
LSD. It
Yeah.
was like my second time ever taking it, and it was a bigger dose. I think it was a normal dose. The first time I'd ever tried it was like only something small.
Yeah.
And it did sort of have me open up and feel into some other ways of being and expressing my energy.
Yeah.
But this was next level. I found my body wanted to purge absolutely everything.
Oh, wow.
And I started feeling energy bouncing up and down my spine.
Yeah.
And it was getting stuck at my throat.
Yeah.
And it was so frightening. It was so nerve wracking. I actually, like, I was doing my best to kind of hold on to the earth
Yeah.
beneath me. Like, I'm just, don't know
Hold
what's
on for dear
happening.
life.
Yeah, pretty much. And I was like, okay, can I dance? Can I go listen to some music and see if I can move it through my body? I was
Yeah.
like, no, it was so intense that the least I could do was just sit on the ground and meditate.
Mm.
And so I was sitting just above this stage where there's a lot of people dancing, and I had the opportunity to just be a witness to whatever was flowing in my world on the outside and the inside. And I closed my eyes and I actually dropped into yogic techniques of
Mm.
meditation, mudras with the hands. I started playing with these. I started experimenting with feeling into this energy and where it wanted to go. And then it occurred to me that, hey, why is it stopping here? Can we encourage it to move beyond that space?
Yeah.
And it basically just shot through into my third eye and out through my crown.
Wow.
And so, what a Kundalini experience is, in a nutshell, is an activation of said dormant energy at the base of the spine. For most people, it gets just a little bit of activation. Yeah, it's our life force energy. It's essentially what has us connecting to the divine fabric in all things, within ourselves, out through the crown, to the earth, to each other.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different techniques that are aimed at awakening
Mm-hmm.
Kundalini. This particular experience that I had, I believe that my body, over the yoga teacher training that I did, prepped and primed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, being in this space where it's like open energy, nature, it was a really beautiful festival, like very wholesome, only 1,500 people.
Yeah.
My body was just ready for it. My soul
Yeah.
was ready for it. And then take a little bit of something to help it along. And then that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I felt this intensity that was very much like an otherworldly experience. And then when I say my third eye was open, my crown chakra was open, I could just see. With eyes closed, I was taken through this massive vision quest.
Yeah.
Looking at myself, my little ego, who I was as a little like fairy flying off into precarious places, not knowing how to protect myself or have healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Messages to come back in connection to the earth and the power the earth holds, meaning get grounded, get embodied, get strong in your body and how you hold yourself, how you express yourself.
Yeah.
There were all of these sort of lessons coming through, like, okay, I don't know how to get there yet, but I'm going to try.
Because that's a lot to come. Like I've done some plant medicine journeys, and even one very recently. And again, like the meeting of the ego it's very deep work. And for someone who's like that kind of seemed to have flooded you quite early and quite all at once, like that's quite intense. How did you like deal with it at that point in time, or is it something that you then had to deal with over time?
I had to deal with it over time
Yeah.
because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It actually shattered my identity as I'd known it. And being a young, vulnerable feminine energy,
Yeah.
and human being, I had a lot of things to navigate that were really challenging. I didn't know how to manage the extreme amount of openness that I felt after that
Yeah.
with the world around me and individuals. And I mean, even in that particular instance, this really dark energy man came to me and started trying to talk to me about sex and orgasm and heaviness. And he's sort of laying on the grass next to me, just trying to suck me into that space.
Yeah.
Just after I'd come out of my like reverie,
Yeah.
in a way, like where it was so beautiful and it felt so light. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh. And he's just like, oh, where have you been? What have you been doing? Like, and then I just told him what I'd experienced, and he's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, that's bullshit. And then I was just talking to him and explaining to him what happened, and he kept trying to drop the energy of the conversation and drop the vibration. And he was a drug addict, and
Oh
even
God.
his carer was like 5 meters away, and she looked drunk as well. So I don't know what.
There was like no hope.
What is this? Anyway, somehow I ended up swaying his whole energy field. And he ended up like bowing down to me at the end of that experience and said, wow, like hands pressed to his heart, I'm just blown away by how light this is and like how amazing this energy is, coming from you. Like, bless you, sister.
That's incredible how you could change someone's energy that drastically.
It was,
without even like having embraced exactly what you've just been through.
yeah, like it was just, I was embodying something
Yeah.
that was beyond me. It was an intelligence, it was an
Yeah.
access to something I was channeling in a way that I had never really done before.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty intense. But after that, getting back to life and getting
Yeah.
back to having to do the mundane and the routine stuff, I actually had no idea really how to integrate anything of what I had experienced.
And reintegration is so important.
Yeah.
Like it's half the journey.
Yeah.
Or more. Like you go and you see, but then it's like, okay, how do I actually take this to my everyday life and reintegrate it? Because for me, when I do those journeys, there's such precious gifts and eye-opening experiences and finding my true self. And the first thing after I come out of it is, I don't want to lose this. And that's where it's like, okay, that's why reintegration and the work with reintegration is so vital. So how did you start to reintegrate these things that you had just experienced?
To be honest, I didn't have any skills at the
Yeah.
time for integration. That was one of the most precarious things about the whole process for me.
Mhm.
I kind of felt like I was untethered after that. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to relate to people.
Yeah.
Nobody in my world had any understanding of the thing that I had gone through.
Yeah.
The experience that I had felt so alien to anything I could have, I could have pointed to. And anybody who knew me, they knew I was off with the fairies and,
Yeah.
exploring spirituality and doing that kind of stuff. So it was really challenging. I went to India after that to deepen into yoga training, but I was really disappointed with the course.
Mhm.
And I don't feel like it gave me some techniques, but not enough that I was seeking to actually provide more ground for me.
Mhm.
And that could also be in the format that it was taught,
Yeah.
really, rather than it being a reflection of poor teaching or a poor teacher, more
Yeah.
that the format just wasn't supportive for me.
I guess there's a lot of different methodologies. Like even in Tantra, like there's like New Age Tantra and then there's more traditional things. And so I guess it's finding the methodology that fits for you.
Yeah. Well, I actually found I wasn't looking so much for Tantra around
Yeah.
that time. I didn't even know what to look for. And
Yeah.
sort of yoga was a bit of a comfort or a go-to. And I'd obviously already understood some things about how energy can flow
Yeah.
and how you can move it through you with intention, with meditation, with mudras, with yoga poses
Yeah.
and intentional grounding or, elevating. But I didn't know who to speak to about anything else,
Yeah.
essentially. It took me quite some time to sort of figure my way through this and integrate what I'd experienced. The main piece for me was experiencing vulnerability in this high degree of open spirituality in a world where I had to make a living for myself
Yeah.
and, find my ground, find friends who could actually understand what I was going through. It took me a long time to even get any of that. So I I started trying out stripping because I felt there was a lot of energy moving through me, and I'm like,
It's
how
funny.
can
It's the
I?
first thing I did when I left school. I tried out stripping when I was at uni.
It was, it was like,
I think it's because I've been like that. I've always been very aware of my sexuality, very sexual. Like from a young age, I was very aware of it, and I was like you go to. I was like, oh well, I'll try this.
and see how it works.
Yeah.
And then I was having random tantric experiences with some of the patrons.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but hang on a minute. Am I making money or am I just having tantric experiences? I'm like, okay, this isn't so good for me. This isn't the best platform. I found I wasn't good at hustling. I wasn't good at competition.
It's like me. I can't hustle. My career was so short lived. I couldn't approach people. Like, go walk around. I'm like, I can't do this. It was like a 2-month career. I was like, I can't hustle.
I think I didn't last much longer.
Yeah.
But what I found within me was like, with all of this energies going on that had not yet been integrated, I found this like intense vulnerability, like this, delicate kind of fairy-esque light feminine, or this like really sharp competitive edge that would like, cut up, potentially cut other women down. And I'm like, hey, what is this? Like, how do I navigate all of these energies moving through me? That ultimately didn't work out. I tried going back to hospitality, going back to yoga teaching. I did that
Yeah.
full time. And then that was just, I just reached burnout.
Yeah.
And I reached overwhelm because there
Yeah.
was still so much I was receiving from the world. Actually, the thing that helped me most was dropping into sex work.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive because
Yeah.
it can be so enmeshed with darkness.
Yeah.
But I found a way to navigate it with light.
Yeah.
With all the techniques that I had been learning so far with yoga and with the light awareness that I'd had around tantric practices as well, I was actually able to most often bring out the best in my clients. And also, you know, when I started, I was working amidst some other women with some very heavy energy. And, you know, will always have empathy for whatever they're going through and the kind of grit that they're stuck in. Some of them I could help a little bit, and some of them you just have to walk on. They're clearly stuck in that space. I had intention to essentially set our own, run my own business with that and make a business of myself with more control and autonomy with who I welcomed in and not. And through that experience, that provided me financial support. That provided me money for further education, which enabled me to learn more about Tantra and do a course in it. That enabled me to also get a professional massage course so that I learned a lot more about, you know, proper techniques with that. Already I had an intuitive flow with these things, like I kind of always had. I've always been good with touch and, you know, intuitive connection with others. But this really upskilled me. In a sense. So throughout that time, I used the escorting work as a way to really bolster me and help me learn more about the practice. And what was fascinating was I, from very early on, opted for a tantric approach to the work. Even though I knew what felt to be very little, I actually had some really powerful spontaneous experiences within that. And men opting for a tantric massage experience, they were having mysterious experiences under my hands that I was not planning. It's just like, what is happening here? Like, this is quite mystical. And then some of them would be like, goddess, I worship the goddess. I'm like, wow, like, I feel all this energy moving through me. And then somebody had told me, he's like, wow, I saw you through my third eye. You were a being of light, just coming down to shower me with the light energy that you hold, that you're channeling from the divine. I was like, whoa, like, I don't know what's happening here, but something's happening here. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot through that process, but still, it wasn't full integration. Throughout that time, I was also supporting my body. With the money that I was getting regular chiropractics because I'd had an old injury to deal with. I was getting regular massage, getting energy moving through me, finding the right practitioners for that. And doing various other modalities along that way that really supported me. The biggest integration piece was finding actually different types of healers, because I found whenever I touched upon the Tantra field with what little I did know about it at the time, the energy didn't feel quite right. Within Tantra, there's so many, they can be dark, as I said, there can be light, there can be a lot of murky. So some of the sort of resources I'd hoped to turn to weren't actually supportive and were not strong enough in boundaries.
Interesting. What are some of the dark? Because I think often when you talk about Tantra to people who don't know a lot about Tantra, they think it's like lovey dovey, like happy, like connection. Like, I think a lot of positive gets associated with it, or like very spiritual, you know, a very spiritual practice. I don't think a lot of people would use the word dark. So it's interesting, like, to bring up, like, what to you is the dark side that you found.
So I think that from the beginning of my Tantra journey with that vampiric energy of the original lover, that was sort of a really big introduction to the dark side of how that energy can flow. And whilst his intentions may not have been wholly sinister or, you know, but selfish, how it ended up being with me experiencing that, it was completely selfish. It was self-invested. So the dark side really comes in when it's you're doing something for your own gains and you're not actually considering others around you. You're doing something to get a lick of power and feel superior essentially like any spiritual modality can be twisted in a way if somebody gets on a power trip with it.
I find that it's so common, like around like spiritual practices. People like get knowledgeable, maybe they get a bit of standing in the community, and then they get this kind of like power ego trip. Even though they're people who probably understand ego a lot, but I don't know what it is. It's like this almost this uncontrollable thing takes over them, and they get this like they kind of can talk down to people because they feel so much more spiritually like alive and alert and knowledgeable than everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I found a lot of that.
Yeah.
And actually, the guy who I'd had as that lover, he had learnt from a teacher in Thailand who had since, over these years, been convicted of sexual abuse on various occasions and basically trying to heal women with his lingam.
His magic lingam stick.
Which is male genitals, if anybody doesn't know. Yeah, his magic stick.
Yeah.
It's like, I will heal your trauma for you. It's this kind of like, it's lax boundaries, it's murkiness.
Yeah.
And, you know, whenever we're looking at darkness, okay, so the sheer end of that is black Tantra, where you're looking at casting spells and setting intentions that are literally for destruction of some things for your own gain.
Yeah.
And then we have what is often what people touch upon when they get involved in Tantra is the murkiness, where the boundaries aren't clear, the consent isn't expressed. People don't even understand what it means to fully consent to an experience because they haven't even understood what it means to embody or know that they're disembodied most of the time when they're engaged in intimacy or otherwise. Yeah, but so it's these things that come into play that make it a bit murky.
Yeah.
So my integration actually came through psychology. It came through other healing modalities like kinesiology. It came through more yoga.
Yeah.
It came through more of the disciplined practices that were teaching me a lot about the boundaries I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And if I look in tantric lineages, that has a lot to do also with tantric Shaivism, which is a lineage of Tantra, which is a traditional Hindu lineage focusing on Shiva as the ultimate god.
Yeah.
Shiva and Shakti, masculine, feminine, are essentially inseparable. Yeah. But Shaivism comes from that focus on the discipline side.
So would you define the Tantra you follow as a particular methodology, or have you really like made your own?
I essentially can't call what I offer as Tantra a traditional methodology.
So you've created what works for you.
I have learnt through reading, through self-study, through looking at various, into various courses and gathering information. Mine is a fusion, but essentially it's modern Tantra or Neo-Tantra. I do my best to align with the lineages that make sense for me, that encourage health, wellness, and integration of parts, because essentially all the integration I lacked for over those years of trying to find my way, I can now help others with that, with finding that, in a safe and supportive space that is vulnerable. So, it does pair these traditional lineages with modern ideologies and new age ideologies as well.
And I think as someone like as a practitioner, because I think there is also a big difference between someone who practices Tantra in their personal life and then someone who does a tantric or a tantric blend, as your work is. And even for someone like me, like as someone who does kink in their personal life versus someone who does it professionally, it's so important to, I think, find your way. Do you know what I mean? And I was like saying before, like the Dom that I am today is completely different from the Dom I was 5 years ago. And while I have learned huge amounts about kink and BDSM and again, like principles, boundaries, consent, negotiation, these are fundamental principles, communication that you have to know no matter what modality you want to practice, but also finding the bits of it that don't gel so well with me and the bits that do gel with me. And also I came to a point where that's okay. Like some people might send me an inquiry, they want to be a client, and it's not the way I like to practice. And I'm like, well, I'm not the Dom for you. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I want to attract. And it's funny when you put it out into the universe, generally that is what I attract anyway. They are my clients because I don't want to force something. I don't want to practice against what my personal modality has taught me and what gives me energy. Because if I start practicing in a way that isn't aligned to it, I find that I end up drained of my energy, rather than at the end of my session I feel energetic. I feel alive. I feel like we call like a dom high. And like I've had that where I've like had days in the studio and then I've like had a dinner afterwards and I'm just like, you'd think I'm on drugs or something. Like I'm bouncing off the walls because I've had such a good session and it's given me so much energy because I've practiced in a way that it's aligned to me,
Yeah.
rather than forcing it.
Yeah.
Do you find that like for you, like starting your business, did it give you that kind of energy, or did you find that you had to go through a point where you were trying to figure out what's giving me energy, what's going to be draining it?
So it was a bit of a long haul to figure out where exactly I fit.
Yeah.
And also the location that I've been practicing out of makes a massive difference too. Right. So even like practicing out of Rushcutters Bay, close to the King's Cross area, I often found the energy just really heavy there.
Yeah.
Clients that would come there just bringing either influenced by the energy of that place or bringing their own funk.
Yeah.
And that place is sort of renowned for, in the past, like over, the past 100 years, some pretty heavy energy.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of burnout times.
Yeah.
A lot. And a lot of pain, a lot of grief. Like, why am I in this practice? I'm so like I feel so vulnerable. My femininity is just getting like slaughtered.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's just me. Just don't know what I'm doing. And yeah, it was really tough. And then there were a couple of times where I had boundary transgressions, where my behavior was like, okay, I was vulnerable to, attraction to a client or whatever. And then this just led me down a whole other rabbit hole that was just awful. Yeah. Where, there's an uneven power keel, and then, you might be accused of taking advantage of the other, or like I was in, in a few of these circumstances. I was so afraid. I'm like, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to navigate all these things flowing in me and manage the energy and manage boundaries.
And boundaries is a big one. Like as the practitioner, and I struggled with that for many years, which led to like my burnout a while ago. Because I was taking in everyone's energy. And I think I've talked about this actually when I saw you at one of your workshops, that I have my aftercare. Like we talk about our aftercare, but it wasn't enough. Like I thought what I was doing, like I'd take off everything, I'd have a shower, I'd visualize getting the energy off of me and then like leave. And it's like, nah, it's like that energy's like, it was stuck on me. And I wasn't having boundaries with people's energies. I was just letting it almost like, the vampire, as you were saying, like I had vampires taking my energy. I was so burnt out and I got like, it was affecting me physically, like emotionally, and my energy. I was stuck in my masculine, which I prefer to be my feminine when I practice. Like I am more of a sensual feminine dom. That is just my natural state. And I was stuck in this masculine energy and I just could not get out of it.
Yeah.
It was just nuts.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Because I've had that too.
Yeah.
And like my feminine side was really lacking for that love and attention and expression. And I was trying to find it, and I was also trying to find externally like more of that, beautiful, lush feminine energy outside of myself. I'm like, I need more of this.
Yeah.
It was challenging to navigate. And I have a question though. With that, did you have to say goodbye to those energies? Did you have to say goodbye to those clients, or were you able to actually shift the dynamic?
It wasn't the clients, it was me. It was me not having boundaries. It was me also not having boundaries at that point, stuff going on in my personal life, also with a very toxic friendship I was in. Interestingly, during that point, I had moved. I had I had my first studio with the dom that trained me, and then I went into my own studio in Paddington, and I was there for like 3 or so years, and it was a really good space. Like you talk about space, it was a really great space. I loved being there, and then that ended unfortunately, and I moved into kind of a next space which was associated with this toxic friendship, and it was just horrible. Like, and the energy of that place, like it's interesting when you said that, something the first time it's really ringed to me that the energy of that place was just completely off. I hated practicing there. I didn't like bringing clients there. And that's where like I had no boundaries. And it's funny, it wasn't client specific, because a lot of those clients are my like regular clients, they're clients I still see. It was me, and I had to take time out. So once I left that place, I then took like quite a few months of like not having a studio. After a few months, I did start seeing regulars. Not my job's not really an out call thing because of the equipment, but I did start seeing some regulars just like that I really liked and like loved seeing. And then got back into having a studio and everything. But I had to take a big break. And that involved me understanding where I wasn't putting boundaries in my life.
Yeah.
And then also doing I've done therapy for over a decade. I'm a very spiritual therapist and did some plant medicine journeys, and also really connecting with meditation and journaling. I like to meditate before my clients get there, so I tap into the energy I want to channel for that session. So all those things, I kind of realized that for me, because I was someone who resisted meditation for most of my life. I was just like, that's not for me. I'm just not one of those people. Now it's like my daily breath. I can't wait. If I can meditate more than once a day, it's like a great day. And I just love it. And I could never have imagined myself being that person, but it's so important to keeping my energy where I want it to be, which for me is the feminine. I do like to spend a lot of my time in the feminine. And I think I do come from a background, especially because I was corporate for a very long time in a very male dominated industry. I had to be a masculine. I was so in that masculine energy. Then, running your own business, like clients, like even BDSM can be quite masculine. And then I think through that, that burnout really was my saving grace, because it made me really evaluate everything about my practice and actually discover I don't want to be my masculine this much. I want to be my feminine, but I love what I do. I have passion for what I do. I love working with clients, because I view what I do and of what you do, we do body therapy. Like that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm providing a certain amount of therapy. And I want to do it from a place of feminine.
Yeah.
So that was a massive turning point for me, like deciding that I have that choice, what energy I want to hang out in. Can you tell us about some like little client stories? Because I'm like dying to get some juicy details. Like, what's what's the craziest client story, or what's like the biggest transformation you've seen from like working with people?
I've had some really fascinating clients come through my doors, some fascinating stories. There's been really beautiful, quirky, like spiritual experiences where they're like tapping into the astral plane. And there's been very hefty PTSD from war
Wow.
being moved through.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's been such a broad spectrum of experiences, but let's touch upon, and I'll try to sort of limit the details because
Yeah,
obviously don't want to breach confidentiality, but I met a client who had had an experience as a youth with various types of abuse from very early on, with some very challenged parents, especially one that inflicted a lot of harm on him, and he had to sort of bear the weight of that. The manipulation, the toxicity across the course of his childhood into his high school as well. And in his high school experienced even more heaviness, at an all boys school under the wrong kind of guidance. And we're talking about people who, just secretly abusive as well. And then he gets into, after that, the army. And it's just one thing after the next, that created such a shielding around him, and he is a good man, a really good man with good, strong values, like he got them from one parent at least, where he just had love, like he just had a strength of love, a strength of goodness in his heart. And he went through a really troublesome experience in a war and saw some serious atrocities through that process, even from his own comrades. Just it changes people. And he was a witness to a lot of that unfolding and didn't feel he could say much. So he ended his time in the army and then essentially got married. But then, a couple of decades later, they have problems.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they probably have problems during the whole time.
Yeah.
But then it reaches an end point. And then it's bitter and it's twisted and it's dark, and it plunged him into a real dark depth. Why? All of the stuff that had not been addressed.
Yeah.
All of the stuff that he'd never spoken about. And through the sessions that we had, I was able to gently tap, tap, tap into him. And I didn't know what stories he was holding, but what I could feel with him under my hands was this tremoring and this clutching, which at first triggered my own fear, like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like that's threatening my boundaries. That's going to like suck me into it. But rather than listening to that fear, I actually lent into it more and inquired more into it. I had curiosity. I'm like, well, what can we do with this? Can we move it? Can we shift it? And we went through this epic process, which pretty much lasted over a year of just unpacking his stories. And it was a really empowering experience actually for us both, because I learned so much in the process too, just holding that safe, nurturing, feminine space, but also a strength. And what he really appreciated about my approach was a wisdom and an insight, like asking him the right questions, having enough sensitivity to what was flowing for him, whilst providing a safe space for him to actually talk and share and unfold. So that was really amazing. And what ended up happening from that, he actually got in touch with his friends and old army comrades and started sharing what he had been learning through our sessions. And then has basically affected, I think it was something like 20 other people's lives, because they're like his friends and their wives and their marriages, and just moving through
The
all of
knock-on
this
effect,
stuff. Like it was a massive ripple effect of, because he's powerful. He's got so much love, right? He always had that. He just didn't quite own it. He didn't embrace it. He didn't know how to tap into it. He had never really had anybody reflect that back to him. And that was a lot of the work that we did together, where I was bringing him back to that light space. And through that power was able to essentially affect his whole community back home where he's from. And that was like, that would bring tears to both of our eyes. Like, wow, this is really powerful. And it extends beyond anything that's going on within our little egos. The work is so much bigger than this. Is like tap into the field and start to correct things and start to find realizations within that being tapped in. And then the effect afterwards is really quite powerful.
I think one of the most powerful things about this type of work is the ability to hold space for this work to actually happen. And I don't think people appreciate, like when people ask me what I do, I say I hold space for people. Essentially, that's what I do. I hold space for people to work through stuff. And it can be very uncomfortable. Like, as you said, like when you started feeling what was coming up, it can be very uncomfortable. And your instinct can be to like, I don't want to deal with this. I want to run away. But like at the end of the day, like that's what we're there for.
Yeah. And the edges that we need to learn as a practitioner to lean into, it's sort of, yes, you don't have to lean into it all the time if you don't want to. I think that's an important thing whenever you're developing yourself as a practitioner of any kind. Like, where do your edges lie? It's really important to know where your edges lie, because you don't have to take on the world. And if you try, you reach burnout and then you become an ineffective healer. Right. So I've definitely had to learn these edges to lean into, because there have been times where I was met with similar energy. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going there. I do not feel the call to go there. And that's a boundary. And there is another practitioner for you. And in those cases, it's okay. It's actually a really beautiful thing to give yourself permission to say, it's okay. That we're not going to do this. Do you want something else that's kind of funny?
Yeah, give it to us. I love it.
So I've had clients who've had proper psychedelic experiences with the tantric work, and it's it's so surprising to them. And actually, whenever I've shared some of these, brief details with others, they're like really surprised, like, how is that possible? Tantra work, in the body work, moving your energy through your central channel throughout your body, it can have an amazing effect on your physiology and everything flowing within you, to the point where it can have you, I guess, on a scientific level, releasing brain chemicals that create proper psychedelic experiences. So through the tantric massage work I've done on couples and I've done on single people, some of them have gone into such states where they've been in a proper reverie.
Yeah.
One guy, I got him in a trance for like 3 hours, but I didn't know he was in a trance. He told me the next day he didn't remember driving home.
Oh, wow.
And that I had, like, essentially I like pulled him into feeling into my energy channel, and then kind of accidentally like drew him on my energy channel, which had him kind of disembodied from himself. And I didn't mean to do it.
Yeah.
It's learning in the practice how to sort of navigate that and make sure, they keep it in their own energy channel. But yeah, he just kind of went for a ride in that energy state and was in a trance and sort of really took a bit to ground. And we had a chat the next day to sort of integrate and help him come back to earth, in a sense.
That's how I always say to people, be careful, because like post-session, you've got to come back down to earth.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, be careful, just like take good care of yourself, tap in, because all the chemicals that are released in your brain, like adrenaline and oxytocin and endorphins and all that stuff is released. And I'm like, you will come back down to earth. So just be careful.
Yeah. So there's definitely things I've had to learn about being a lot more careful with, closing sessions. And, but yeah, then there have been other experiences. So I had somebody express that they basically had the most trippy experience they'd ever had and was seeing like pyramids and eyes and just this multiple things looking at them, and they felt like they were sort of out of their body but in their body and looking at their body. And then I had another guy who traveled through the astral plane and basically saw me as a being made of stars. Who was guiding him through the universe.
Wow, that's pretty beautiful. I'd love to be a thing of stars.
It was really cool. Yeah, so like it's been pretty fascinating. Like, I mean, that's just a few of the experiences. The other, like, there's some physical things that can happen too. Like, people can get really crampy.
Yeah.
And like breakthrough breathwork does for some people, what I found fascinating is actually the same things happen in a tantric massage. And we are not going through breakthrough breath work. They're not even doing breath like that. They might just be doing abdominal breath, which is what I encourage as a base. That, they just at least have a consistent flow into the belly, sending the breath right down. The energy starts to move and they start getting all crampy hands, little crab claw things, and like start arching through the back. Yeah. Almost like it looks like an exorcism. Yeah. Like, energy's flowing. And it's just about holding the space for it. Yeah. And just like keeping the ground, keeping the stability. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love that. It's incredible how many people don't breathe down to their stomachs. So many people shallow breathe. And when you actually feel it, because that's something that when I started doing breath work was like breathe down to my stomach and making sure that I am like not shallow breathing all the time. It like makes such a big difference.
Yeah, it does.
What would you say is the most rewarding thing about what you do? Like, what have you found has been the biggest benefit to you, like fulfillment in your like life from Tantra and your practice?
So there is that I can see my clients' lives change beautifully, right? And start to infuse their life with more love, more passion, purpose, more awakening. That's wonderful. But within the tantric practice, I've also had to learn of not overgiving and giving back to myself, which is a major part of the practice. Yeah. In order for me to keep being the practitioner that I want to be, empowered, strong, able to continue to give, I have to give to self. And so my tantric practice, Tantra itself, has really helped me find my way to healthier boundaries, find my way to more self-love, had me, more able to access multiple perspectives flowing rather than just feeling stuck to one, be it negative, be it positive, or whatever, being stuck. It's allowed me freedom to actually open up. And with this, I feel like my soul gets more dynamic.
Yeah.
In my bodily expression, in my verbal expression, in how I think.
Yeah.
I start to access. I think a lot of people equate this to like tapping into the quantum field kind of thing. And I don't necessarily need to go down that path or define it in that way, but it's like you tap into a field and you start to feel like life gives you access to things that you wouldn't have believed possible in your limited mind state.
Yeah.
That's what it's probably done most for me.
Yeah.
And the amount of beauty, passion, love, light, richness that has come from that for my life has been amazing.
I love that. Well, I literally could talk to you for hours more, but thank you so much for coming and sharing today. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
White Dakini.
White Dakini.
So at Instagram, we've got at White Dakini or whitedakini.com.
Great.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us. And as always, stay kinky.